Welcome to the next room. Yeah. Welcome to the next room. From the field on my way to the next room. Welcome to the next room.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Next Row. I'm your host, Vernon Davis. Today, I have an amazing guest. This guy is super busy. He's done a lot. He's continuing to do a lot. Man, it's such an honor. DeVon Franklin.
Yo, what's up, man?
Hey, what's going on with you, baby?
Not much. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you as well, man. Thank you for being here. I know you got a lot going on, man. And, I think this episode is going to definitely inspire a lot of people. So we thank you for being here, man.
Of course, man. Anything you need.
D, you grew up in Oakland. Now, I've done my research on you. You lost your father early. You mentioned that your family's coalition helped to steer you. How do you feel that foundation still shows up in your work today?
Yeah, man. The foundation of my mother and my grandmother's 7 sisters, helping to raise me and my 2 brothers. I mean, that's the foundation that I stand on. It shows up in just who I am, commitment to just discipline and work ethic, excellence, so to speak. And also, when I look at even the movies that I produce, a lot of the stories that I've produced have been female empowerment stories. And I think that has a lot to do with my upbringing and a lot to do with, just the women that really took the time out of their lives to sacrifice for me and my brothers to make sure that we could even get to a future like we have and do it in a successful way. So I feel like it shows up in everything that I do, certainly in everything that I am. And I'm just so, blessed to have had them in my life. And, my mom is still around and 5 of my grandmother's sisters are still around and doing well. The oldest is 99. The youngest is 79, and they still are doing their thing. So it's still a blessing to not only have had them for me growing up, but to also have had them in my life right now. It's truly one of the joys of my life.
Yeah, do you feel like a lot of what you do, everything that you're accomplishing, goes back to them? Because we all have something in us that we want to give back, and is that kind of what's your motivation? Is it the woman, your family that raised you, or what is it for you?
Yeah, for me, the motivation is to make good on the sacrifice that they made for me and my brothers. It's like, man, they put their lives on hold, especially my mother, so much that she did to make sure that me and my brothers had a future and grew up, well, and to be turned into, at the time when we were young boys. I mean, her hope was that we would become good men. And so, I feel a responsibility to make good on that sacrifice, by doing what I can to make sure that my life is a life worth living, a life of value, a life of integrity, so that I can make good on the sacrifices that they made. And so that's a big part of my motivation, man, is to, I'm not just doing it for myself. You know what I mean? I got my family's name on my back, and I'm here doing it for them as much as I'm doing it for me.
Yeah, no, that's dope, man. That's dope. I love to hear that.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment early on in your internships over at Overbrook MGM in Columbia where you sat down and said to yourself, "Oh, this is what I'm meant to do"?
Yeah, I mean, I had an idea that I was meant to go to entertainment and go to Hollywood and make films. I had a feeling about that very young. I mean, probably in my early teenage years, if not younger. And when I was 18, I went to the University of Southern California, USC. And that freshman year, I got an internship, for the company that managed Will Smith and Babyface and so many other, great artists at the time. And, that internship gave me a lot of exposure to the business. And, at the time, when I first started, it was more kind of music focused. And then my junior and senior year, I interned for Will's Overbrook Entertainment Company, which he had started my junior year, and then I had more film experience. And so, for me, as I was doing the internship from the earliest days of the first internship, I knew that this was a path for me. I enjoyed it. I was passionate about it. I loved learning the business. I loved understanding how the business worked, meeting so many people that were, a part of the business. So, I mean, yeah. And then once I got to MGM, which was my first studio executive job, working on films like Be Cool and Beauty Shop, and then going to Columbia Pictures, working on Pursuit of Happiness and 7 Pounds and Karate Kid. Any one of those experiences let me know that I was in the right place. And I remember, never forget, we made the Karate Kid remake in Beijing, and it was just amazing to be in Beijing, China, for the year that we made it. And I was going back and forth from the States to China to the set to make sure that the movie was going well. And it was
Mhm.
just phenomenal. So, there have been many instances along the way where I feel like I've gotten confirmation that this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. And, and here I am now. I'm doing it.
Mhm. No, that's awesome, man. I applaud you for that. Just because I talk about momentum all the time. Momentum is doing what we do and staying consistent at it. Without momentum, we'll never know what's possible for us. So, I mean,
That's
you
right.
doing it, man. You doing it, brother. You're a huge inspiration to so many others. Many creative people struggle to bring faith and spiritual themes into mass media. What has
Mm.
been, I say, what has been the biggest internal debates and bridging that gap for you?
Um, yeah, no, just it's like people go to church for sermons. They go to movies for entertainment.
Mhm.
So, it's always a question of, when I'm doing a project, whether I'm producing it or even acting in it, it's just always a question of like, okay, what making sure that I stay rooted in the intent. The intent is to uplift and inspire, and to make sure that the story itself says everything that we need to say, without like making something preachy. Um, and that is, something I've learned how to do, kind of how to, you know, that nuance, so to speak. I've worked that out and learned how to do that over the years, where I can tell a great story that still has, themes of faith expressed and explored without it feeling contrived or feeling like the whole point was just to deliver, a message, that the story speaks for itself. So, that's probably the greatest tension. It's always like, okay, wanting to make sure I'm telling a good story, wanting to make sure that story is rooted in truth, and the story will speak for itself. So, it's interesting. It's like approaching it that way has actually made it much easier to do this than if I was approaching it as a way to like preach a sermon. Like it's like the sermons are for the pulpit, and the movies are for the set. And so for me, being able to tell stories and find stories that align with my overall vision of uplifting the human spirit, it makes it much easier to then incorporate themes of faith, because the stories already themselves have that baked in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And what does it mean to have a story rooted in truth?
The story rooted in truth is, it's really about like, okay, what is this character experiencing?
Mhm.
And what is the hope for them, and what is the conflict that they're experiencing, and making sure that those characters, the characters that I tell, or feature in my films or TV shows, that there's a truthfulness, like an audience member can watch the movie or watch the TV show and say, wow, I relate to that character. That's authentic. So that's what it means to be rooted in truth, authenticity, that it doesn't feel contrived, doesn't feel fake, it feels real. Like, oh man, this is, a real movie. This is a real story. Like and getting the audience to relate to the main characters is so important, because if you don't have characters that people care about, then you really don't have a story people care about. And so for me, it's always about like finding, okay, what's the truth of this character? What's the truth of their journey? And then how do we make sure that we make it difficult, because if something's too easy, you're not gonna like the movie. The movie's gonna be boring, you know. But if the main characters face challenges and they overcome those challenges in an inspirational and entertaining way, then you get to a place where the audience says, wow, that truth not only resonated, but it was well executed.
That's powerful the way you said that. I mean, gosh, that's amazing. I feel like a lot of people need to hear that, especially storytellers, man, because sometimes we can miss those gaps. We can we can miss those gaps. And there's a lot that lie in between that. So if we don't understand the true essence of storytelling, then how can we create that story? Right?
Exactly. 1000%.
How do you evaluate a story and know enough about whether it can live in both spiritual and mainstream?
I mean, I've been doing it a long time. If you go back to the first movies I worked on, it's
Mhm.
been over 20 years that I've been doing this and have the experience and expertise on how to develop stories that, have these uplifting themes or these inspirational, characters. And, yeah, I mean, that's really because I just have the experience doing it. I've done it many, many times over. And so I've really, and I also, I'm looking to get better. You know what I mean? I want to become a better storyteller. So, every movie is another chance for me to sharpen my tools to, really get, take the filmmaking up, take the development up, take the storytelling, to a higher level. But my foundation is just time, having spent so much time doing this, developing stories, developing scripts, making movies, being in production, being in post production. I mean, it's just thousands and thousands of hours have been dedicated to this craft. So that really gives me the ability to have an innate sense of what feels right. Like, oh, okay, this movie, the movie I just did, Ruth and Boaz. It's like, okay, there's something about it that I feel that I'm connected to. It's motivating me, and I feel like it's going to be commercial. Not that, my taste is the end all be all, but if I don't like it or if I don't feel it, then I can't, then I don't think it's going to be commercial. So for me, I'm always about the feeling, like, ooh, how does this feel? This feels good. And then when I say commercial, I'm talking about something that you can sell to a wide audience. So there are certain stories I've come across that I feel good about, but I'm like, ooh, I can't sell that to a wide audience. Like there's not enough in that story to
Mhm.
appeal to the masses. So then I don't do it. But something like a Ruth and Boaz, that was a story that I thought about and said, oh, why don't we do a modern version of it? And I felt like, oh, wow, this movie will work for a wide audience because a lot of people have an awareness of the story, and it's a love story. And when you look at like the history of the movie business, when you do a love story well, they usually tend to be successful commercially.
Mm, mm. And doing it well does that have anything to do with what you said as far as telling that story? That's doing it
Yeah,
well, right?
doing it well
Right.
is great. Getting the script right,
Mm,
getting the right director, having the right cast, making sure the production value is there, making sure the locations are good, making sure the editing is good, the music is good. So that's the process of getting it right. It's a process of, let's make a commitment to make this movie and this story as best it can possibly be. And
yeah,
and getting it right is getting it to a place where, for all intents and purposes, that goal is achieved.
right. Okay. So let me ask you this question. When you're sitting here, you're thinking about this project that you guys are in production, and now it's time to take the next step, which is post production. Is post production one of the most important pieces to a film? How important is post production?
It's everything. I say that you make a movie three times. You make it in the script, you make it when you actually physically produce it, and then you make it again in post production. And in post-production, if you got the right editor, you can take a bad movie and make it a good movie. If you have the wrong editor, you can take a good movie and make it a bad movie. So post-production is essential. It's essential. I mean, there have been times I've had to switch out editors because, the editor didn't quite see how to take what we shot and make it its best version. And then you bring in a new editor who has a totally different point of view, and then they're able to take what we shot and make it even better. So, movies are made in post-production, period, with the right sound design, the right music, the right editing. I mean, you can take something that doesn't look good at all, and it's possible if you got the right story and there's enough raw material, you can put that thing together and make it look great.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy. Wow. That's interesting the way you described that. Cause it's, how important is it to so now let's go back to production. When you have, how important is sound and having the right lighting when you're filming a
Oh,
project?
everything, man. You got to, it's like, first of all, the right lighting, is the right cinematography. So it's got to look inviting. It's got to look powerful. It's got to look, like distinctive, is really the right word. It's got to be distinctive. And then, sound design is essential because, when you don't have good sound design, it can be hard to hear dialogue. The mix may not be right. So it's important. I mean, I spend a lot of time on my films making sure the mix is right, making sure the sound design is right, so that when anyone sees the film, they not only see it, but they hear it and they can experience it. And it looks like a quality film. The film that I just did, Ruth and Boaz for Netflix, which is out now, that film, has great cinematography, great sound. And the cool thing is that the audience appreciates it. That's one of the main feedback I've gotten about people who've seen the Ruth and Boaz movie, talking about how, amazing it is, and talking about the quality of it and the cinematography and sound and direction and all those things. So it's very, very important to have the lighting right and the sound right, because if either are not great, the movie's not going to be as great as it could be.
Wow. That's powerful. That's crazy. What's the
Yeah.
process when you're doing these projects that you want to produce? Do people pitch the projects to you? How does that work?
No, actually, that's interesting. I mean, the movies that I've made as a
Mhm,
producer, with the exception of the animated film that I did, all of the movies I've made have been self-generated,
mhm,
meaning they're ideas that I found, that I put together, that I, developed from the ground up.
mhm.
I haven't yet gotten a project where someone pitched it to me and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna do that as a movie." Maybe that'll happen one day, but to date, they've all been true stories that I've come across, or ideas like a Ruth and Boaz that I come up with and say, "Oh, wait a minute, let's take this Bible story and modernize it." But I would be open, to someone else bringing me a project, but usually it's me putting it together and being the driving force behind every aspect of it, to get it to the place where it can be made, hopefully in a successful way.
What was the process of Ruth and Boaz?
Yeah, so that movie is a film that is out on Netflix right now,
Mhm,
and it is, a love story that is based in the Bible, and I came up with an idea to do a modern version of it, and that film, is on Netflix right now. It stars Tyler Lepley as Boaz and Saraya as Ruth, and Felicia Rashad as Naomi, and it
mhm.
is just my goodness, it's a great movie, incredible film. I mean, over the weekend it was number one movie on Netflix, and I made that film a year ago in Atlanta, and it's just doing well. And so many people, love a good love story. They love what the movie's about. Um they love all of it, and so it's great to have had an idea in my head, like, oh, I think this can work, and then go do it. And then now it's out in the world, and you see that that what I thought was possible actually is possible, and people are responding to the film in just an amazing way. Like, I mean, every time I open my phone, there's someone who's sent me a tweet or a DM or Facebook posts telling me how much they love the film. So it's really resonating because we haven't had a good love story in the culture in a long time. So feels like the Ruth and Boaz movie is striking a very strong chord right now.
Wow, that's amazing. How does that make you feel, man? To like come up with an idea, um, put your spin on it, create it, and now it's doing really, really well. That got to be a great feeling based on where you come from, how you started, and just the whole journey of being who you are at the moment. What does that feel like? What is that feeling?
Man, it feels great. I mean, it's truly gratifying, I must say. Like to be in this position to have had a dream, as a teenager of coming to Hollywood and making content and making films and being successful, and then to be where I am now and it's working. It's pretty amazing. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I had no family in entertainment. I had no friends. I knew no one. So I just came out here on faith, and to see what has happened and what is happening, man, it's pretty significant. And I try to take some time to enjoy and put it all in perspective in the moments when I'm not too busy, because it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing when you really look at all the odds of losing my father and being raised by a single mother, and the odds were not in my favor, and to be able to be here and to be successful and doing the thing that I wanted to do when I was young is it's amazing, and it's just incredible what faith does and what God can do.
Mm, that's special, man. That's special. Uh, Gosh, when a partner or studio comes to you and they said, "Let's make it more marketable," how do you hold firm without compromising the message?
I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't really had that experience.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I haven't had that experience. I mean, normally when I'm doing a movie, what's happening is the story itself is the story. So, the when I'm dealing with the studio and they go to like start working on trailers or material to share,
mm,
I'm in lockstep with the studio about what the messaging should be, what the positioning should be, what the trailer should look like. And there's never been an instance where they're trying to um disrupt the integrity of the film, or try to market something that, isn't. I mean, most of my films have some level of faith or spirituality in the film. And yeah, we have never had an experience where they're trying to make it something different. Because that's the whole reason why they gave me the money to do the movie, is that they believe in the story and they believe in the audience that I can reach, that they can't reach on their own.
mhm,
And so that's what's so important. And my experience with studios to date has been really good. I mean, I've had some phenomenal partners in Netflix and Amazon and Sony Pictures, Disney. It's been really, I've had some really great partnerships over the years. Fox, to be able to get my films out and do it in a way that works, in a way that has integrity.
mm, integrity. No, that's awesome. Um, so you speak about integrity. Do you look for the people you deal with when creating this film? Like there's obviously a lot of people you have to bring together when creating this project. Do these people have to be people of integrity? Because the stories you're dealing with, I mean, these are stories that a lot of people can relate to, right? So the truth has to be there in everything surrounded by this film when it comes to integrity and everything. Is that something you look for when you're working with people? Because I've learned too, being in this industry, like the people that I'm working with, sometimes they can either mess a project up or they can add value to the project. So how important is that to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to find people that share the vision of the movies that I'm doing. So yeah, that's very important. I mean, every member of the crew, every department head, every actor, is really important that we're all on the same page about the movie we're making. And I spend a lot of time, in the process of just making sure that that's the case, because when we're all making the same movie, then you're going to get a product that is good because everybody had the same vision and they knew what the target was. If people don't know what the target is, and one actor's doing it for this reason or crew members doing it for that reason, then you start to
Mm.
get a movie that doesn't resemble what it maybe could resemble if everyone was on a united front. So it's very important for me to identify the right people to understand, like, this is what I'm trying to get across. This is what this story is about. This is why it's important. This is the target. And then getting everyone aligned with hitting it. And thankfully, with the productions that I've done, that has been the case. And that has been, truly, truly a huge blessing in getting so many great artists and so many great talents and so many great crew members to help me make these films that are reaching the world.
No, that's amazing because
Yeah.
and going back to Ruth and Boaz, because this adaptation lives in the intersection of faith, romance, and modern storytelling. How did you and your writers balance honoring the biblical source while giving it emotional relevance?
We spent a lot of time, just going through the scripture and really just ideating on, like, okay, well, what would this be today? It's like, okay, well, Ruth and Naomi start in a place called Moab. Well, what would Moab look like today? And how do we, what would, Bethlehem look like? And we just started, like, going through the scriptures and just doing our best to take some creative leaps where we felt appropriate. And really just try to say, okay, what's the essence of the biblical story about? And how do we retain that in our adaptation of it? And adaptation is an interpretation. And so we're not doing the literal biblical story. We're interpreting it for a modern audience. And there's no rule book on how to do it. Some people see it and they say, oh man, that was amazing. Other people see it and say, oh well, they should have done this and that, or they left out this and that. So at the end of the day, these things happen because there is no one way to do it. But the intent is always going back to the scripture and then saying, okay, here's what the scripture says, and then here's why we're doing this, so that you can read the script and you can read the scripture, and we could go through the script and walk you through how all of the choices come back from something in the scripture. So that way it's anchored in a truth that helps the movie feel authentic.
Mm. And what do you hope viewers take home from this, especially those who may have never encountered the biblical scriptures? You know what I mean?
Man, I
Like
want them to
what
take, yeah, hope, love. The cool thing is that the people that have been seeing the movie all around the world, that's what they're taking away. They're taking away, like, wow, this gave me hope again. Wow, this gave me the motivation to open up my heart. This, reminded me of God's love. This, inspired me. I mean, the testimonies on this film have been absolutely phenomenal and incredible. And yeah, it's very gratifying to just see that people are getting what it is I intended, for this to be a movie of hope. A lot of times in the area of love, dating, and relationships, I mean, it can be very difficult, extremely difficult. And, I wanted to provide hope for people in an area that can be challenging. And I want them to see Ruth and Boaz, and I want them to remain optimistic. And that's what's happening. So it's really, really great that, I could have made this film and had this idea, and then boom, people are like, yeah, that's why we love the movie.
hmm No, that's awesome. You have a new project called Soul on Fire, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm acting in that one.
Yeah, no, that's dope. So you tell us about Soul on Fire for those who don't
Yeah.
know about it.
Yeah, so I'm acting in this film. It's a film that Sony Pictures is releasing nationwide October 10th. And basically this movie it's an inspirational true story. It's a true story of a man, a motivational speaker named John O'Leary. And the thing that makes him interesting and unique as a motivational speaker is that when he was a child, at 9 years old, he was burned through an accident over 100% of his body.
Mm,
And I played the nurse that rehabilitated him as a kid and basically gave him the ability to walk again. and then, he goes on to have this life where he is motivating, other people, and in the process has to heal his own wounds, because there's a lot of things that he was holding on to from the accident, even as an adult. And so this film, stars myself. It stars John Corbett. It stars our Oscar nominee William H. Macy. It was directed by Sean McNamara, who did the movie Soul Surfer years ago. And I'm excited to be a part of this film. It's a beautiful movie. It is so inspirational. I mean, it's a tearjerker, and it's a family film. You can watch this movie with your youngest all the way to your oldest. So I'm excited to be in this film, and it'll be out in theaters nationwide October 10th.
Okay. No, that's powerful, man. I love that you're telling these stories because I grew up in the church. I'm very spiritual. I'm all about God, and
Amen.
the things that we go through in life really impacts us. I had to learn. I had to heal. I don't know if you know, but I lost my brother played 10 years in the NFL. He died last year at
Oh,
35.
wow.
Then my
Sorry.
sister 28, 3 weeks after him. So I had to bury both of them. I had to pick
Oh,
out the
man.
casket.
Sorry.
I had to go to the graveyard. I had to go to his house and clean out his house. So a lot of that,
Jesus.
of course, I had depression after that. You
Yeah.
can't do anything like that with some of the most impactful people in your life, and then try to just go on and just keep going. You have to. There's something there. There's healing. So, but what I learned from that, kind of like the stories that you're telling, it's like I can share this. I can share this through storytelling. I can share this through, just through film in general. And I can bring hope, give hope to people because there's beauty in death. There's beauty. Once you figure out um, why it happened, and you understand that God is never going to give you more than you can handle. You find the beauty in everything. And just like this. So
Yeah.
I thank you
Yeah.
for telling these stories, man. It's a
Wow.
beautiful.
Thank you, my brother. Absolutely.
Yeah. And now you're, you know, working in front of the camera is totally different than working behind the camera. How do they
Yeah.
how do they how has working in front of the camera influenced your approach behind the camera?
Um, I would say that working behind the camera influences my experience in front of the camera, because
Mm,
I understand, what a production needs. I understand the sensitivities and stuff. And so as an actor, being kind of production minded, I think that kind of helps. But I think both work in a great way. Like me being in front of the camera, I have a better idea of what actors go through. I mean, what actors need. So when I'm producing a film, giving actors reassurance and supporting their performance and giving them feedback is really important, because behind the camera, I can see the monitors, I can see everything that's going on. But when you're in front of the camera, you don't know. All you know is, the director tells you to stand here. You did the scene. You can't see anything. You don't, you hope it did. You hope it was good. And so giving that feedback is so important. And I know that when I'm an actor, and I get feedback, from the director, from the producer, it really means a lot. It boosts your confidence. Truly. I mean, acting is a very vulnerable thing,
mm,
because you are, trying to remember lines and be authentic and be in the moment and give a performance that feels truthful. And it's not easy. And so, it requires a level of sensitivity to be able to do that. So, getting that kind of feedback is so important. So I think one really helps the other, but certainly being a producer and then stepping into acting, I think makes the acting better, because I really am very clear on what needs to be done in that moment. And I go in and I deliver it.
mm. That's awesome,
Yeah.
man. That's all.
Thank you, man.
Soul on Fire is scheduled to drop October 25th. What is your personal mission moment that you hope audience take away from it?
Yeah, I hope that audiences take away, John O'Leary is one of the most motivational people and wonderful people I've ever met. And his story is truly a story of perseverance and the triumph of the human spirit. And also everybody, and he becomes who he becomes because everyone rallied around him to help him. And so I
Mm,
really want people to take away from this film compassion. One, I want them to have a good, entertaining experience, which I think they will. And then two, I want them to be compassionate. I want them to, walk out of the theater feeling like, okay, wow, how can I be a committee of one to do as much good in the world as I can? How can I make sure that I'm, doing the things that need to be done to just be a better neighbor to someone or help someone in need? That's what I want the film to inspire. That compassion, that love, that care, that sense of community, because it really took a community rallying around John O'Leary when he was a child that gave him
Mm,
a chance to be the adult that now inspires millions around the world.
yeah, no, I get that. Um, looking back, looking back, has there been a? I want to talk about the risk. Like, there's a lot of people don't know in film. There's a lot of risk we take, whether it's financially, creatively. Um, has there any? Can you talk about any risk that you've taken from that aspect?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say spending the majority of my career behind the camera and now stepping in front of the camera, that's a risk. It's a risk that is not, it's like, ooh, that may not go too well. And so, I think I kind of live in that energy a lot where it's like, you know what? Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So, let me see if I have the ability to act, and I might fall flat on my face. And and that's the risk. The risk is that maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. Maybe I don't have the skill set that I hope I do. But the only way to know is to do it. And the beautiful thing about a risk is a risk, even if it doesn't work out the way you may want, um, I feel like it's so much better to live life on the other side of a risk than to always live in the what if. And when you decide not to take a risk, and also these risks are not irrational risks. I mean, they're risks that are within the realm of possibility, if that makes sense. It's like, you know, I didn't know I was going to be able to. I didn't know I was going to do as good a job as I did in Soul on Fire, but I did have a belief and I could look at my life and say, okay, I can play this character. This character is very similar to me. I can do that. And so, but in terms of financial risk, for the movies that I produce, I don't take a financial risk. The studios that I'm in business with, finance the script and production and post-production and distribution. So, I have yet to kind of like finance my own film or anything like that.
Okay, okay. So you just rely on every financiers funding the project. Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. You, um, how do you? What's one of the best qualities about yourself when it comes to creativity? Because we know you can do it all. You can produce, you can act, probably direct. Um, you
Yeah.
you do it all, man. So what's that number one quality about you creatively?
I would say the number one quality is, I mean, it's hard to articulate, but like, I just have an ability to tap into like, okay, going back to something we've talked about, just the truth. What's the truth of this story? What's the truth of this character? What's the truth of this moment? And being able to drop into that is probably the one of my greatest assets creatively, because that's what I bring to every project. You're gonna, whether it's the movies I'm doing, whether it's the TV shows, whether it's the acting. I'm one of the stars of Tyler Perry's new show on BET Plus called Divorce Sisters. And even that, it's like that character is very different than me, but I'm still finding that truth of that character in a way that really cuts through and resonates with the audience. So I think that's something that I'm really skilled at, of just like what's real here, and like let's get there. Um and I don't know, maybe that just came from my upbringing, maybe it came from, just preaching, I don't know, but I know that that's the thing I'm very good at.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I just want to remind everyone that Soul on Fire drops October 2025. Make sure you go see it. It's going to be one of those stories that you'll remember for the rest of your life. Thanks to my man D right here, Devon. We appreciate you for giving us that story, man, and letting us live
Yeah,
through
man.
your direction. So we appreciate that. If there's a story that there's a story probably right now, or a story that you've been thinking about that you want to get out between now and the next 5 years, right? What is that story?
Um, I have a movie that I'm doing with Amazon that I've
Mhm,
been working on for a long time called Daring to Live about
mhm.
four women that do extreme adventures to face their greatest fears in life. And, I'm getting close to that, making that film. So that's something I've always, it's just a great story. It's uplifting, it's inspirational, and I love it. So that's the movie that I'm very, very excited to make. And it's one that I've been working on, shoot, man, for like at least 6 years at this point. So by the time we make it, it'll be like 7, 8. But I'm really committed to putting that story in the world and absolutely look for it to be made within not just the next 5 years, within the next year. That's where I'm at with it. And I'm very excited because a lot of times we all are afraid of something. And this movie really shows what's possible and what happens on the other side of our fear.
Oh no, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And D, I know you got to run, so I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but I'm gonna stop. I got a couple things I want to do with you real quick. One thing I want to do with you real quick.
Sure.
Rapid fire. Pick some things that I think you might be that I might be right about these. Let's see. All right. If you had to choose, Bad Boys or Training Day?
Oh man, why would you do that to me? I'm gonna choose Bad Boys.
Founder of Uber or Airbnb?
Uber, without a doubt.
Ah, Southern Cali or the Bay? I know that answer.
Oh, Southern Cali. I'm going Southern Cali. That's where I've
Oh,
been for
man,
30
come on,
years.
man. What about the Bay?
The Bay is cool, but it's cool to visit. I don't want to live there.
If you could play with Magic or Jordan, which one would it be?
Jordan, without a doubt.
Okay. Coffee or energy drink?
Energy drink. I don't like coffee.
Okay. Being from the Bay, 49ers or Raiders?
Raiders.
Okay. If you could catch a TD from Brady or Peyton Manning, which one would it be?
Brady.
Would you rather a championship and making only 50 million or no championship and making 300 million?
I'll take the championship in 50.
Man, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for joining us on Next Road, man.
You're welcome, bro.
Grateful. We're grateful, so grateful. And if you love
Thank
what you're
you.
hearing now, make sure you follow me at Vernon Davis 85 on Instagram and Facebook. I appreciate you, D.
Appreciate you too, dog. Thanks so much.
All right, baby. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome to the next row.